Imagine waking up in mid-14th century England, around the year 1350. The world around you is completely different, far from what we're used to today. There's no electricity, no modern conveniences, no hot water or central heating. Instead, there's cold, dampness, and a constant struggle to survive. You lie on a straw mattress inside a small wooden hut. The walls are made of roughly hewn logs, and the floor is packed earth. Instead of windows, there are just holes covered with wooden shutters or cloth to keep out the wind and rain. Light barely filters in through the cracks, and the room is dim and shadowy. The air is filled with smells that would seem unpleasant to you today. It's a mix of smoke from the fireplace, dampness, the scent of animals, and human bodies. There's no ventilation, and the smoke from the fire used for cooking slowly fills the room, making you cough and rub your eyes. Heating comes from a fireplace or stove fueled by wood. Gathering firewood in the forest is hard work, done by all family members. In winter, the house is cold, and in summer, it's hot and humid. You feel the chill creeping through your clothes and bones, and you realize this is just how life was back then. Your clothes are made from rough fabric, wool or linen. It's scratchy and irritates your skin, but there's no other choice. Clothes are rarely changed or washed because water and soap are scarce. You wear simple tunics, pants, and cloaks that protect you from wind and rain, but not from the cold. Around you is a world where people live very simply, but are always busy. Every day is filled with hard work, caring for family, and fear of sickness and hunger. There were no hospitals, pharmacies, or doctors to help with serious illnesses. People relied on herbs, prayers, and folk beliefs. You hear the sounds of the street, merchants shouting, dogs barking, church bells ringing. Life in the village or small town is lively, but far from comfortable or safe. People live in close quarters, often sharing their homes with animals, which creates extra problems with hygiene and health. In this world, every day is a challenge. The lack of modern technology, constant cold and dampness, disease, and hunger, all of this made life very hard. But it was in these conditions that the medieval person was shaped, someone who, despite all difficulties, kept living, working, and hoping for better days. So, you find yourself in 14th century England. Get ready to learn why in this world you wouldn't last a day without serious trials. But before we dive into the details, let's take a closer look at what a typical day in the Middle Ages looked like. Now, let's take a closer look at what a medieval English home was like in the 14th century. Imagine a small hut built from simple materials found nearby. It's not a stone castle or a spacious house. It's a humble dwelling where people take shelter from the weather and spend most of their lives. The walls of the hut are made of woven branches plastered with clay. It's a simple and cheap construction, but it's not very sturdy and doesn't protect well from the cold and damp. Sometimes, the walls are reinforced with wooden posts to make them more stable. The roof is made of straw or reeds, layered to create a waterproof covering. However, over time, the straw rots and needs replacing, so the roof needs regular repairs. Instead of foundation, the hut simply has an earthen floor. It's packed down and leveled, but it remains cold and damp. In winter, the floor is covered with frost, and in summer, it gets moldy. To insulate the floor somewhat, it's covered with straw or rushes. The hut usually has one room where the whole family lives. Here, they sleep, eat, cook food, and do household chores. Space is very limited, and people live in cramped and messy conditions. In the corner of the room is a fireplace or stove where a fire burns. It's used for heating and cooking. Smoke from the fire fills the room, and people are constantly coughing and choking. The furniture in the hut is very simple and functional. It's a rough wooden table, a few stools or benches, and a chest for storing things. There's usually no bed. People sleep on straw mattresses spread on the floor. Bedding consists of rough linen sheets and woolen blankets. Lighting in the hut is very poor. During the day, light comes through cracks in the walls and roof, and at night, they use candles or oil lamps. Candles are made from animal fat, and they give off dim light and a lot of smoke. Oil lamps are filled with vegetable oil and a wick is lit. They give a little more light, but also smoke and smell a lot. The hut has no plumbing or sewage system. Water is taken from a well or river and must be carried in buckets. Waste is dumped directly into the street, creating unsanitary conditions and contributing to the spread of disease. Overall, the dwelling of medieval Englishmen is a very modest and uncomfortable place. There are none of the conveniences we're used to, and people live in a constant struggle against cold, dampness, and disease. But it was in these conditions that the character and resilience of the medieval person were formed. In 14th century England, hygiene was very different from what we know today. People rarely bathed, and bathing was often considered not only unnecessary, but sometimes even harmful to health. Water was seen as a source of disease rather than a means of cleansing. Most people did not have access to clean water. Wells and rivers were often contaminated with waste and sewage because there was no proper sanitation system at the time. People dumped their waste directly onto the streets or into nearby water sources, which led to the spread of infections and illnesses. Soap was expensive and rare, mostly available only to the wealthy. Ordinary peasants and townsfolk usually went without it. Instead, they used herbs and various infusions to clean their bodies and hair. Dental hygiene was practically non-existent. People did not brush their teeth like we do today. Sometimes they chewed on herbs or used cloths to wipe away plaque, but this was far from modern standards. Because of poor hygiene and unsanitary conditions, epidemics were common. The most terrifying of these was the Black Death, the bubonic plague that swept through Europe in the mid-14th century, killing millions, including many in England. The disease spread rapidly and was almost always fatal. Medicine at the time was primitive. Doctors and healers treated illnesses with herbs, bloodletting, and prayers. They did not understand the causes of diseases and had no knowledge of germs. Often, treatments were ineffective or even harmful. Despite all these difficulties, people tried to take care of their health as best they could. They followed simple rules, avoiding spoiled food, staying away from the sick, and using folk remedies. So, hygiene and health in medieval England were serious challenges for everyone. The lack of modern knowledge and conditions made life fragile and often short. But it was in these harsh circumstances that the resilience and toughness of the people were forged. In 14th century England, food was simple, plain, and often scarce. Most people were peasants who grew their own crops and raised a few animals, but their diet was far from what we consider balanced or nutritious today. The staple food for most was bread, made from coarse, dark rye or barley flour. White bread, made from fine wheat flour, was a luxury reserved for the wealthy. The bread was often dense and hard, sometimes mixed with bits of chaff or dirt, making it less than appetizing. Porridge was another common meal, usually made from oats or barley. It was filling and easy to prepare, but lacked variety and flavor. Vegetables like onions, leeks, cabbage, and beans were eaten when available, mostly in the warmer months. Meat was a rare treat for most people. Raising animals was expensive and time-consuming, and without refrigeration, meat spoiled quickly. When meat was eaten, it was often salted or smoked to preserve it. Common meats included pork, beef, and mutton, but many peasants rarely tasted them. Fish was more common, especially for those living near rivers or the coast. Freshwater fish like carp and pike were eaten, as well as salted or dried fish, especially during religious fasting days when meat was forbidden. Dairy products such as milk, cheese, and butter were consumed, but usually in small amounts. Milk was often turned into cheese to preserve it longer. Sweet treats were scarce. Honey was the main sweetener, but it was expensive and not widely available. Sugar was a rare luxury imported from distant lands. Meals were simple and repetitive, often eaten twice a day, a light breakfast and a more substantial evening meal. Food was cooked over an open fire or in a simple hearth, and utensils were basic: wooden bowls, spoons, and knives. Despite the simplicity and scarcity, food was central to daily life and community. Harvest festivals and religious holidays often featured special meals and celebrations, offering a brief respite from the daily struggle. Understanding the diet of medieval England helps us appreciate the hardships people faced and the resilience they showed in making the most of what little they had. In 14th century England, access to clean water was a constant challenge, and a lack of sanitation made disease a pervasive threat. People often drank from the same sources they used for washing and disposing of waste, leading to widespread contamination. Wells were a primary source of water, but they were often shallow and easily polluted by surface runoff. Rivers and streams were also used, but they served as both water sources and sewers, carrying waste from homes and industries. The concept of germs and bacteria was unknown, so people didn't understand the connection between dirty water and illness. They often attributed diseases to bad air, evil spirits, or divine punishment. Waterborne diseases were rampant. Dysentery, typhoid fever, and cholera were common, causing severe diarrhea, dehydration, and often death. These diseases particularly affected children and the elderly, who were more vulnerable. The Black Death, or bubonic plague, was the most devastating disease of the era. It arrived in England in 1348 and wiped out a significant portion of the population. The plague was spread by fleas living on rats, which thrived in the unsanitary conditions of medieval towns. Other common diseases included influenza, smallpox, and measles. These illnesses spread quickly in crowded living conditions and could be deadly, especially for those with weakened immune systems. Medical treatments were limited and often ineffective. Doctors relied on herbal remedies, bloodletting, and prayer. They had no understanding of how to prevent or cure infectious diseases. The lack of sanitation and clean water made life in medieval England a constant battle against disease. People lived with the ever-present threat of illness and death, and the average lifespan was significantly shorter than it is today. Understanding the challenges related to water and disease helps us appreciate the progress we've made in public health and sanitation and the importance of clean water for a healthy life. In 14th century England, life was defined by hard work and physical labor. The vast majority of people were peasants who worked the land, and their days were long and demanding. Most peasants were farmers who toiled from sunrise to sunset, 6 days a week. They plowed fields, sowed seeds, harvested crops, and tended to livestock. The work was backbreaking and relentless, with little time for rest or leisure. Farming was done using simple tools like wooden plows, scythes, and hoes. There were no tractors or modern machinery, so everything was done by hand or with the help of animals like oxen and horses. Women played a crucial role in the workforce. They helped with farming tasks, cared for children, cooked meals, made clothing, and managed the household. Their days were filled with endless chores and responsibilities. Children also contributed to the family's livelihood from a young age. They helped with lighter tasks like herding animals, gathering firewood, and weeding crops. Education was rare, and most children learned practical skills from their parents. Besides farming, there were other types of labor. Blacksmiths, carpenters, weavers, and other skilled artisans provided essential goods and services to the community. They worked in small workshops, often from dawn till dusk. Life was physically demanding, and injuries were common. There was no workers' compensation or disability insurance, so people had to work through pain and illness to survive. Despite the hardships, work was also a source of pride and community. People took satisfaction in their skills and contributions, and they relied on each other for support and assistance. Understanding the nature of work and labor in medieval England helps us appreciate the value of hard work and the importance of community in overcoming challenges. In 14th century England, safety and security were constant concerns. Life was often dangerous, and the legal system was harsh and unforgiving. Crime was rampant, especially in towns and cities. Theft, assault, and murder were common occurrences. The lack of effective policing and street lighting made it easy for criminals to operate. Travel was also risky. Bandits and highwaymen roamed the countryside, preying on travelers and merchants. People often traveled in groups for protection, and armed escorts were common. The legal system was based on custom, tradition, and the authority of the local lord or king. There were no professional lawyers or judges, and trials were often decided by ordeal or combat. Punishments for crimes were severe. Petty theft could result in public humiliation, fines, or imprisonment. More serious crimes like murder or treason were punishable by death, often by hanging, burning, or beheading. The concept of due process was limited. People could be arrested and imprisoned without a warrant, and trials were often unfair and biased. The wealthy and powerful had an advantage in the legal system. Local lords and landowners had significant power to enforce the law and maintain order in their territories. They often had their own private armies and courts. Despite the harshness of the legal system, it served as a deterrent to crime and helped maintain some semblance of order in society. People understood the consequences of breaking the law and generally tried to avoid trouble. Understanding the challenges related to safety and law helps us appreciate the importance of a fair and just legal system and the need for effective law enforcement. In 14th century England, religion was an integral part of daily life. The vast majority of people were devout Christians, and the church played a central role in society. The Catholic Church was the dominant religious institution, and its teachings influenced every aspect of life, from birth to death. People attended Mass regularly, observed religious holidays, and followed the Church's moral and ethical guidelines. Belief in God, heaven, and hell was widespread. People believed that their actions in this life would determine their fate in the afterlife, so they strived to live according to God's will. The Church provided spiritual guidance, education, and social services. Priests and monks were often the most educated members of the community, and they served as teachers, counselors, and caregivers. Religious rituals and ceremonies marked important life events, such as baptisms, weddings, and funerals. These ceremonies provided comfort, community, and a sense of connection to the divine. Belief in saints and miracles was common. People prayed to saints for intercession and believed that miracles could occur through divine intervention. Superstitions and folk beliefs were also prevalent. People believed in magic, witchcraft, and the power of charms and amulets to ward off evil spirits and bring good fortune. Despite the strong influence of the Church, there were also dissenting voices and challenges to religious authority. Some people questioned the Church's wealth and power, and others sought alternative forms of spirituality. Understanding the role of religion and beliefs helps us appreciate the spiritual and cultural context of medieval England and the importance of faith in people's lives. In 14th century England, life was mostly about hard work and survival, but people still found time for entertainment and leisure. These moments provided a much-needed break from the daily grind and helped to build community. Simple games and sports were popular. People played games like dice, chess, and checkers. They also enjoyed activities like wrestling, archery, and foot races. Music and dancing were common forms of entertainment. People sang folk songs, played instruments like the lute and the recorder, and danced at festivals and celebrations. Storytelling was a favorite pastime. People gathered around the fire to listen to tales of adventure, romance, and heroism. These stories were often passed down through generations. Festivals and holidays were important occasions for celebration. People marked religious holidays like Christmas and Easter with special meals, games, and festivities. They also celebrated harvest festivals and other seasonal events. Traveling entertainers, such as minstrels, jugglers, and acrobats, provided entertainment in towns and villages. They performed in public squares and marketplaces, drawing crowds of onlookers. Hunting and falconry were popular pastimes for the wealthy. They hunted deer, rabbits, and birds for sport and for food. Despite the limited opportunities for leisure, people in medieval England found ways to enjoy themselves and to connect with others. These moments of entertainment and relaxation helped to make life more bearable and to strengthen community bonds. Understanding the forms of entertainment and leisure helps us appreciate the cultural richness of medieval England and the human need for fun and relaxation, even in the face of hardship. Living in 14th century England was a constant challenge. Without the comforts and conveniences we enjoy today, people face harsh realities every day, from cold and damp homes to hard labor, disease, and strict laws. Yet, despite these difficulties, medieval people showed remarkable resilience and strength. They built communities, maintained traditions, and found moments of joy and connection through faith, work, and leisure. Understanding their lives helps us appreciate how far society has come and reminds us of the human spirit's ability to endure and adapt. The struggles of the past shaped the world we live in today. By learning about medieval England, we gain insight into the roots of modern life and the enduring qualities of courage, hope, and perseverance. Thank you for joining this journey back in time. May these stories inspire you to face your own challenges with strength and resilience.